Hey guys and girls, my name is Steph Mischook with killersites.com, killerphp.com, CSS tutorial, well, a bunch of sites. In this quick little video, I'm going to answer a question that was recently put to me. And the question is, what is the difference between a graphic designer and a web designer, and what profession should I choose? I can see why people would get confused between graphic designers and web designers, because on the surface, and in certain respects, they do similar work. Both professionals have to create nice looking designs, nice looking layouts. The fundamental difference, though, it comes down to that graphic designers are typically designing for print, things that will be printed, newspapers, magazines, CD-ROM covers, brochures, that sort of thing. Whereas web designers, of course, are designing for the web. Where these professions diverge in an even bigger way is in that web designers have much more to do besides making the page look good. Graphic designers, essentially, they make the page look good, pleasing to the eye, and they have to prepare the layouts that they produce so that they're printer ready or printer friendly. Say printers, those machines that print those brochures, etc. They need to, they have files sent to them in a particular way. I actually have a certificate in graphic design and print and all this kind of stuff. I've even run presses, so I have a pretty good idea of what this is all about. Web designers don't have to concern themselves with print, but they have a whole slew of other things that they have to concern themselves with. For instance, not only do web designers have to make the pages look good, the pages actually have to be, they have to work well as well, in that they have to load into their browsers properly, quickly. Also, the pages have to be designed so that they're very usable, user-friendly. Actually, there's a whole specialization in web design called usability, and there are web professionals that just do that. They look at websites and they make sure that their design is structured so that they're very user-friendly. And this is very, very important in terms of the success or failure of a website. Another thing that web designers have to understand is proper site structure. Things have to be, not just site structure actually, but page structure. Things have to be set up and structured properly in the code and in the way the website in the way that the website is structured, so that the website is easy to update and easy to maintain. There's a whole bunch of other things that web designers have to understand and know that has nothing to do with graphic design. And I could, depending on the site, I can argue that in web design, the graphic design aspect of it, maybe, depending on the site, maybe 25%, 30% of the job or less. So what you see in terms of web design, looking at it from a layman's perspective, from the perspective of somebody who hasn't done it, you just see the design aspect, the visual aspect. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that are very, very important to the game. So the second part of this little video was the question on what profession should you choose? What's the better one? It comes down to two things, in my opinion. Number one, where do your strengths lie? Are you inclined to be a really good designer? Do you have the designer's eye, if you will? You see, design, like a lot of other skill sets, like natural athletic talent, natural musical talent, design is something that you have. You would have had it at a very young age, and if you're gifted, you have that designer's eye, that ability to know when a page or a brochure or any type of layout looks good. You'll know this instinctually. If you don't have this skill set, then you definitely don't want to get into graphic design, because in graphic design, it's pretty much all about how well you can make how well you can lay out a page, or how well you can lay out something, how well you can design something. Whereas in web design, it's such a broad profession that you even if you're not a great designer, you could find yourself doing very well as a web designer or a web programmer. You can become a usability expert. You can become what I call a web monkey, a mechanic, somebody who goes in there, makes sure that the structure of the site and the pages are properly done. You can become a search engine optimization expert. I didn't get into that before, but it's another web design specialization. All these things, web programmer, all these things have nothing to do with actual design, the aesthetic aspect of it. So, number one, when you're considering whether to become a graphic designer or web designer, besides what you might like to do, you have to look at your skill sets. If you're design talented, then you can look at graphic design. If you're not, don't even look at it. It's time to go to web design. Now, let me just say, just because you're design talented, it doesn't mean you should become a graphic designer. I would actually argue that you should go into web design. Let me explain why. Reason number two, that I think that web design is probably a better choice, is because web design is a growing business, is a growing industry. I don't have any specific data points to cite, but I just look out there and I see what's going on, and it's pretty clear to me. Look at magazines. Major magazines are folding, meaning going bankrupt, or they're shrinking in size. Newspapers are going bankrupt all the time. CD music sales are dropping off the face of the earth. They've dropped 50% in the last decade. These are all things that graphic designers would be involved with, and since there's less and less of these things, you would imagine there's going to be less and less demand for graphic designers. Don't get me wrong, there's always going to be a demand for graphic designers, but it's diminishing. And where this traditional media, print media, magazine, etc., where this stuff is diminishing, it's diminishing because it's going to the web. So that sort of makes sense there. If you go into graphic design as a profession, you will at some point or another find yourself getting into web design. That I can guarantee. The problem is that web design today, as I mentioned before, is much more sophisticated than it used to be. And when graphic designers jump into web design, they're going to have problems designing actually good sites. They could design probably good-looking sites, but most of the time they won't be usable, they won't be functional, they won't be search engine friendly. And the fact of the matter is, graphic designers who jump into web design, unless they train themselves in all these other skill sets, they usually turn out crappy-looking websites. So for me, although I'm pretty biased, I saw the writing on the wall back in mid-90s, and I concentrated my efforts on the web as opposed to the print business, because that's where I think it's going. It's accelerating. So if you're making that choice between a graphic designer and a web designer, personally I would advise web design, whether or not you have design talent. That said, if you're a really good designer, you will get work in graphic design, and it can be a great career as well.